The school hallway was buzzing the way only a high school hallway could be: chaotic, restless, full of laughter that was a little too loud and footsteps that never seemed to stop echoing. The walls were lined with colorful posters announcing the upcoming football game and the annual fundraiser, but nobody was paying attention to those. All eyes, as usual, were on Ryan Thornhill. Ryan wasn't just another student, he was the student. Blonde hair, athletic build, varsity jacket with a big golden bee stitched proudly on the chest, he looked like he had walked straight out of a glossy movie poster. And with him came the entourage, other players, wannabes, the kind who laughed at all his jokes, no matter how cruel. That morning, Ryan leaned lazily against a row of lockers, a cigarette dangling from his lips. The smoke curled into the fluorescent lights overhead, daring the rules to do something about it. A circle of students hovered around, equal parts entertained and nervous. Everyone knew smoking was banned. Everyone knew Ryan didn't care. Mr. Carter, the new English teacher, walked down the hall with a stack of papers tucked under one arm. He was different from the other staff, still young, with an edge of grit in his jawline, the kind that said he'd lived through storms. His first week at the school had been quiet, but students whispered about him. They said he'd once been in the military, others swore he'd worked blue-collar jobs before teaching. Nobody knew for sure. But what they did know was that he didn't bend to nonsense. When Carter saw the cigarette, he stopped. His voice was calm, even gentle, but it carried. "Ryan! Put it out!" Ryan turned, eyes narrowing with that practiced smirk that made him both admired and hated. "Why? Afraid of a little smoke, teach?" The crowd chuckled, though uneasily. Mr. Carter stepped closer. "School rules apply to everyone. Even you." That was when Ryan decided to make his point. He pulled the cigarette from his lips, glowing ember bright against the dim hallway. Then, slowly, deliberately, he reached for Carter's hand. "You want it put out?" His grin widened. "Fine." And he crushed the burning tip into the teacher's palm. The sound, flesh-sizzling, seared itself into everyone's ears. Gasps rippled through the crowd. One girl covered her mouth with both hands. A boy muttered, "Oh my God." Mr. Carter's jaw tightened. His hand shook with the burn, but he didn't scream. He didn't yank it back. He just looked at Ryan direct, unblinking, steady. The silence in that hallway was a vacuum, broken only by the faint crackle of burning tobacco. Then the double doors at the far end of the corridor swung open. A man walked in, flanked by two aides in crisp suits. His presence changed the air instantly. Conversations died. Feet shuffled. Even the teachers who had been walking past froze. Because everyone recognized him. Alexander Gray. Not just a billionaire, not just one of the most powerful men in the country, but a legend. The kind of man who had clawed his way up from poverty to build an empire of steel, technology, and philanthropy. His face had graced magazine covers, his speeches were studied in universities. And now, he was here, in this hallway. Ryan's fingers loosened. The cigarette dropped to the floor. His smirk vanished. Alexander's eyes swept the scene, the teacher's scorched hand, the terrified students, the privileged boy shrinking under his gaze. His voice, when it came, was low but cutting. "Tell me, boy, do you think that makes you powerful?" Ryan froze. His throat worked, but no words came. Before I take you deeper into this story, I want to pause for just a moment. If stories like this, stories of pride, pain, and redemption, speak to you, I invite you to subscribe to my channel Soul Touch Stories. Each week, I bring you tales that will touch your heart and stay with you long after they end. Now, let's step back into this moment that changed everything. Mr. Carter finally pulled his hand back, the skin raw and blistered. He still hadn't shouted, still hadn't lashed out. He simply said, "Power isn't in hurting others. It's in protecting them." Alexander Gray's gaze softened for a fraction of a second at those words. Then he turned back to Ryan. "I know your father. I know what he's built. But understand this, his money won't save you from becoming nothing." The crowd was dead silent. For the first time in his life, Ryan Thornhill didn't feel untouchable. That night, Mr. Carter sat alone in his small apartment, tending to his wound. The sting brought back memories of his past, of long days working in factories where burns and cuts were part of survival, of nights wondering if he'd ever escape. He hadn't become a teacher for prestige. He'd become one to change cycles, to show kids there was another way. Even if it meant taking scars. Ryan, meanwhile, sat in his mansion-sized bedroom, surrounded by luxuries but unable to sleep. His hands still smelled faintly of smoke, but it wasn't the cigarette that haunted him, it was Carter's steady eyes. And Alexander Gray's words. Words that pierced deeper than any punishment he'd ever faced. Over the weeks, the ripple effect grew. Students began looking at Carter differently. The bandage on his hand wasn't weakness, it was resilience. He taught with the same fire as before, quoting authors, weaving lessons with stories of endurance. Kids who never listen leaned forward. They weren't just learning English. They were learning strength. Ryan avoided his usual antics, not out of fear of Carter, but out of confusion within himself. He stayed back after class one day, lingering by the door. "Why didn't you hit me back?" he asked, almost whispering. Carter looked up. "Because if I had, I'd be just like you. And I refuse to be." Ryan left with those words echoing in his mind. The turning point came weeks later at a school assembly. Alexander Gray had agreed to speak. The auditorium buzzed with excitement, but Ryan's stomach was in knots. He knew what was coming, public humiliation, perhaps. Alexander took the stage. His speech wasn't about wealth. It was about character. About growing up with nothing, about nights when hunger was louder than hope. About teachers who believed in him when nobody else did. And then he turned toward Mr. Carter in the audience. "That man," Alexander said, pointing, "reminds me of the kind of strength this world desperately needs. The strength to endure pain without passing it on. To carry fire and still offer light." The applause was thunderous. Students looked at Carter with new reverence. And Ryan felt something break inside him. Not shame this time. Something deeper. A need to change. That afternoon, Ryan left a note on Carter's desk. "I'm sorry. Not because I got caught. Because you didn't deserve it. Teach me how to be better." Carter read it. His heart softened. He didn't smile, but he nodded, quietly acknowledging the first spark of growth. Change didn't come overnight. Ryan slipped. Sometimes he snapped at classmates, sometimes his arrogance flared. But slowly, steadily, Carter's quiet resilience guided him. Ryan started helping behind the scenes, organizing charity events, defending kids who were bullied, showing up for people who once feared him. Whispers turned into respect. His past wasn't erased, but it became part of his story, proof that arrogance can transform into empathy when challenged with truth. Before I bring this story to its resolution, let me pause once more. If you've been moved by Ryan's journey, by Carter's strength, and by Alexander's wisdom, I'd love for you to like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to Soul Touch Stories. Together, we'll keep bringing these powerful stories to life. Years later, Ryan stood on a stage of his own. Not in a high school, but in front of hundreds at the launch of a foundation he had built. Its mission? To provide education and mentorship for kids from broken homes, kids who thought money or cruelty defined worth. "I once thought power meant control," Ryan said, voice steady. "But I learned real power is in choosing who you become, despite your past. Two men taught me that. One built an empire from nothing, Alexander Gray. The other carried scars to show me that strength is in restraint, Mr. Carter." The crowd rose to its feet, applause roaring. And in the front row, Mr. Carter sat quietly, the faint scar on his hand a reminder, not of pain, but of purpose. Because in the end, it wasn't the wound that defined the story. It was the healing.